Right. I now welcome the South Australian Wine Industry Association, and I understand, Ms Nolan, that information on parliamentary privilege and the protection of witnesses giving evidence to Senate committees has been provided to you.
Correct.
And for the Hansard record, if you could just please give your name and the capacity in which you appear today.
Bridget Nolan. I'm here as the General Manager of the Winegrape, as I also sit as a committee member of SWA, the South Australian Wine Industry Association.
Thank you. I'm just going to say, sorry, with the hearing acoustics in the room, the air conditioning affects feedback, so if we can just get you to bring the microphone clearer.
Is that better?
Bring the microphone closer, and I might just get you to just repeat that, please, Ms Nolan, because I struggled to hear you too. So the capacity in which you appear.
Confirming that I am the General Manager of the Winegrape, responsible for the operational performance of the Winegrape Australia, and I'm also a representative of the South Australian Wine Industry Association Executive Committee.
Thank you. Do you wish to make a brief opening statement before going to questions? Sure.
To the Chair and Senators, thank you for the invitation to attend today. My name is Bridget Nolan and I appear here today in the capacity as the General Manager of the Winegrape located at Loxton in the Riverland. For the record, I'm also a Riverland representative on the South Australian Industry Association Executive Committee. I was born and bred in Queensland. For generations, my family have been heavily involved in the sheep and wool industry. We have lived and breathed rural Australia our entire lives. Prior to joining TWG, I held various agribusiness and corporate finance positions in Australia's top 4 financial institutions. I moved temporarily to the Riverland in 2012 to facilitate the completion of my Masters of Technology in Viticulture. I have not left. I've held the General Manager position of the Winegrape since January 2023. In this position, I am responsible for the operational performance of the Winegrape Australia Proprietary Limited, in line with the strategic direction of the business. As the most senior TWG representative in Australia, I play a significant leadership role in managing all aspects of Australian operations. This includes the overall responsibility for grape sourcing, wine quality, personnel management, as well as all budgetary and financial responsibilities and reporting. Established in 1981, the Winegrape is a privately held company based in California, USA, and the 3rd largest wine producer in the world by volume. The Winegrape acquired the Loxton Winery site in 2011. This is the only facility that it owns outside of America. TWG Australia is a 100% bulk wine processing facility. Wine only leaves the site in containers or by road tanker. TWG Australia does not have a domestic wine program. The Winegrape does not own vineyards in Australia. We are...
Seek clarification. Are you here representing the Winegrape or the South Australian
Winegrape?
Oh, sorry. That's not what we've got. Sorry.
No, we've cleared that up.
It was sent, I believe the correspondence was sent through earlier.
No.
Sorry, I was just listening and thinking like, that's not where my questions were going.
Yeah.
Please, my apologies.
Yeah.
Please
Keep going.
All good. The Winegrape does not own vineyards in Australia. We are 100% reliant on contracted growers to supply fruit on an annual basis. In 2024, we partnered with 84 grower entities to crush approximately 50,000 tonnes. This accounts for 14.1% of the grapes crushed in the Riverland and 9% of the South Australian crush. Our growers are by far our greatest assets. Our business would not function without growers, and I have never considered the relationship with them anything less than a partnership. I have always encouraged open, frank communication with respect to winery expectations and full visibility where possible as to how and why grape prices are determined. As the global wine market remains somewhat stagnated, the Australian wine industry continues to face significant challenges. The Winegrape Australia wrote down over $9 million in stock as a direct result of the Chinese tariffs. Despite lifting these earlier in the year, we still sit on significant volumes of red wine in tank. Our commitment to our growers to take Shiraz where we can saw us stripping it to water white in 2023 and 2024 to use as a white blender for our white wine programs. We continue to adapt and change, and where we can, without the continued support and investment from our parent company in America, as a business, we would not be sustainable. Consumer trends continue to show decline, and we are in direct competition with the European countries to remain competitive in a global market. Cost of goods continue to rise. For example, utilities alone have increased from $734,000 in 2023 to a budgeted figure of $1.6 million in 2025. Winery additives, safety, compliance and casual labour also continue to increase incrementally to an overall $66 per tonne, to increase from 2024 to 2025. This does not include the cost of the fruit. The global industry, without question, remains extremely volatile and uncertain, which in turn puts all industry stakeholders at risk. The Australian wine industry is extremely multifaceted with varied and diverse participants. As you will see from the submissions made to this inquiry, there are an array of businesses, wineries, all of which have different contractual arrangements, payment terms, ownership structures, strategies, product offerings, markets that they are targeting and competing in. A broad brush blanket approach has the potential to be detrimental to cooperation, collaboration and co-design within the industry. Capital investment, research and development, product innovation, new and alternative markets, continued development, efficiencies, marketing and sales teams are costs borne by wineries, necessary costs that are absorbed with the sole purpose of moving product and maintaining market share. Accreditations such as HACCP, ISO, SWA, EPA, to name a few, are also necessary to facilitate the production of wine, as well as the compliance standards required for wine to be exported to other countries. Equally as large as our grower base are the employees of the wine group, 35 permanents and 52 casuals, whose livelihood through employment I am also responsible for. Cellar staff, maintenance, administration, winemakers, school-based apprentices, all of whom play a pivotal role in the production of wine and ensuring the containers make it to the port. Community-based trades, transport and logistic companies, both road and sea, and other service providers are also engaged and contribute to the longevity of the business. The wine group is a fully integrated international business that contributes both economically and culturally to the local community and the Riverland as a whole. The current environment is tough, complex and extremely difficult to navigate. I have reviewed the other submissions prior to appearing today, and I hope to provide you with further understanding of the complexities and costs involved in running a wine production business to support your deliberations and assessment of assumptions and commentary provided to you as part of the inquiry. I believe a detailed understanding of the full supply chain and pressures faced by all participants is key. I have and will always continue to be an advocate for the primary producer, as well as to continue to conduct business that I believe to be fair, equitable and advantageous for all stakeholders. TWG always releases prices by the 30th of November. These are done via email and published in the local paper. Our payment terms are 50% 30 days after receival and 50% 30th by 30th of June. The purpose of the Code of Conduct for Winegrape purchases is clear. Its primary purpose is to establish a framework for fair and equitable dealings between producers and buyers of produce. It is not a function of the Code to govern purely commercial matters such as price or ancillary matters such as environmental sustainability, representation on industry bodies, risk management of market fluctuations, product labelling, sustainable farming practices or ethical sourcing as advocated by some. I'm not in a position to comment on the specific commercial or operational matters relating to growers and wineries beyond those those of TWG deals with. I will leave those matters concerning to those parties. So I'm pleased to be here today to share insights from and on behalf of the Wine Group as they relate to the adequacy of the voluntary code of conduct and the terms of reference of this reference committee. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Owen. And is TWG signed up to the voluntary code?
No, we are not.
And would you have problems, I think I've got it pretty clear in your opening statement, but if your growers came to you and said that they want a mandatory code of practice, where would you go then? What would you do? What would be your...
Well, presently TWG works and operates within the parameters of the voluntary code. We would need the opportunity to closely examine any such proposal as it relates to the TWG's business in order to provide a response. The unintended consequences of additional regulation, government control of the code and the constraints and inflexibility this would yield would also need to be considered very carefully. The Australian wine industry, as mentioned, is comprised of a large number of varying businesses and models and participants of all sizes spread across a variety of regions.
So, and I have no idea who the Wine Group was, sorry, I'm very clear now. I'm very clear, and going by your opening statement, that your growers are your partners, and I think, yeah, that's great, that's tremendous. But, and I don't know if you can answer this, but is everyone as upfront and honest with their growers as TWG is?
I can't answer that.
Okay, fair enough. And I was going to just ask, what about some of the evidence that we've heard today where growers, individual growers, were saying, wouldn't it be lovely if they could get information on what crop is needed by May, so then they could make informed choices of whether they were going to plant or what they were going to plant or not going to plant. What would TWG's position be on that?
Our position is more around the pricing transparency, not necessarily the source. We are not in a position to advise growers of what they can and can't plant, but what we can do is certainly provide transparency with respect to the pricing on the varieties that they have planted. Hence, why they are growers of the wine group.
And you do that now?
Yes, we do that now, and they're pardon?
Did you say 30th of November you do that?
We release our price by the 30th of November, but I certainly advocate and 100% on board for price transparency. It's extremely important for growers to have that to make decisions so that they too can change to market conditions.
Okay, thank you. Senator Rushton?
Thank you very much, Ms Nolan. Just interested, how does TWG go about setting its prices? What are the input factors in terms of how you determine your prices for the year?
So the Wine Group forecast operational budget runs from January through to December. It is simply not possible or reasonable for me to release an accurate grape pricing any earlier than really October, November prior to vintage. In most cases, we simply do not have a firm understanding of the cost of materials, inputs and other relevant budgetary components that feed into the determination of prices that we are viably able to offer growers. For example, I'm still negotiating the nitrogen supply contract, and it was only last month that we were informed that the SO2 supplier plant, sulfur dioxide, supplier plant burnt down in Germany. This has resulted in substitutes and a lot of scrambles being made, and we have found one, obviously potassium metabisulfate or PMS, which is double the price. Winemaking inputs and utilities form almost 35% of the TWG operational budget. So to give an accurate and ascertain a final figure any earlier than that is almost impossible.
So you're telling, from what I've just heard you say, that it's the cost of the production that is determining the price of the grapes. You're not being dictated to by what the market price for bulk wine is.
That's my next paragraph.
Oh, sorry, I thought you finished.
The timing of when we can make prices also is largely dependent on when we have a clear view on forecasted demand for wine volume for the forthcoming vintage. This is determined by the volumes crushed in the Northern Hemisphere and our on-forward demand plan, which is based in the United States, who work from historical, current and forecasted consumer insights.
Okay. So can I take it from the evidence you've just given, that in effect you're a price taker on the basis of your input costs and the market conditions that are globally set?
100%.
Okay. So we heard evidence this morning from a number of witnesses in relation to the impact of price taking that they're having. They're price takers because of the prices that are set by the manufacturers in this instance, and you're saying that you're price takers because of the market that you operate in. I'd be interested in your views on how we can end up with a mutually beneficial outcome from this discussion, because it sounds like the two price takers in the room are actually not the ones in control of this market at all. The ones that truly are in control of the market is obviously the international marketplace. So splitting them up domestically and internationally. So how much of your product's sold in Australia?
0.
So everything goes overseas. So you have no control whatsoever in terms of a regulatory environment to actually even up, I suppose, by knocking that code of conduct type concept on to the next person in your supply chain.
No, so all of our product is purchased by our parent company that has been in existence for 20 plus years, that have predetermined contracts and what have you with the supermarkets that sit in America, and they are obviously subject to the consumer demands, the fluctuations and the like that our domestic Australian retailers and producers would be as well.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Senator Ashton.
Some
Senator
questions.
Pocock?
Yeah, thank you. How many producers do you buy from?
84.
84. And how long is the average length of your commercial relationship with those 84?
I'm proud to say that of the 84, that at least 40% have been with us for 5+ years.
40% 5+. And how many just for 1 year?
That is solely dependent on the grower.
Sorry?
The rest would be on an annual basis, and that is solely that decision is made by the grower, not the company.
Sorry, you never terminate a contract?
No, I can't get enough contracts.
Okay, you have never terminated a contract with a
I
producer?
have never terminated a contract since I have been the general manager, and it's to the best of my knowledge that
But that
the
was
contract
only-
has not been terminated either.
Sorry, I thought you said you started last year. in the-
2023.
2023. So how many months have you been in the job?
Well, it was 18.
18.
I'm coming into my third vintage now.
Yeah, great. So, but you personally have never terminated a contract. Has TWG ever terminated a contract with a producer?
To the best of my knowledge, no. And I worked there in a commercial sales capacity prior to that, and prior to that I was also a contract customer of the wine group as well.
And where are your 84 producers located?
Throughout the Riverland, predominantly at Loxton, but we do have growers here at Renmark, Barmera and Winegrape.
And have you ever had a legal dispute in relation to any aspect of any
No, we have
contract?
not.
In 20 years?
I can't comment on that. I don't know.
So in your 18 months, no, but you...
In the 18 months as general manager, no, and in my 4 years of employment at the wine group, I've never seen a legal dispute, and I can't comment on anything prior to that.
So if I think about the evidence we've received today, Ms Nolan, it's been essentially about earlier notification of price,
Yes.
more clarity and transparency about price, the opportunity for to bring in an independent arbiter when there is a dispute, which clearly you have no issues with, and for some penalty where those particular amendments to the code, as proposed by people this morning and in evidence we've received, how would any of them be problematic for you?
I work on a philosophy in business of no surprises. I have a mantra of being particularly transparent with growers, and as in my opening statement, I encourage and endorse full communication. I don't believe in these situations that there should be any event that a grower or in any partnership between myself or the growers that they would not know where they stood with respect to some kind of indicative price, their contract and the like. So I'm all about mitigating the risk rather than creating it.
Yeah. I try and do that as a senator too, and I bet everyone on this side of the table does, which is try not to have surprises and try and be an honest dealer and hold our integrity high. Clearly this is the way you prefer to operate. So why is it a problem that a minimum floor of decent behaviour shouldn't be implemented in relation to the suppliers in your industry? I just don't see the problem where there are clearly people who do breach, for example, a arbitrated outcome and cause great harm to a large community. How is that a problem for you when you are clearly, as you articulate, setting a high standard of integrity? Why not hold the whole industry through a mandatory code to that standard?
Because you're dealing with humans. And you're never going to get everyone to toe the line, and I can't comment on that either. I can only comment on the commercial arrangements I have with the wine group. I'm not accountable for how anyone else runs their business or how the contract or supply agreements they have with their particular growers. I can only comment and set the standard with my own growers.
And are you accountable to a board?
No.
Have you, has anyone in your organisation considered the code and the possibility of signing up to it?
We have, but we've always worked within the parameters of it, and we're of the opinion until others do, then it's a futile exercise for us.
But if it was applied across the industry, would you see it as your responsibility to meet that code?
If it was applied, if I was in agreement with it and it worked for the strategy of the business, then yes.
You mentioned unintended consequences. What's in that basket? What are the things you're thinking about that might be unintended consequences of a code that's mandatory along the lines we're talking about?
Again, I can't speak on behalf of the other participants in the wine industry. All I can reiterate is that there is an array of businesses with different strategies, and I feel that a code of conduct could potentially unintended consequences for the smaller producers with the expectation of paying in 30 days could be unreasonable and unviable for some of those, which would also potentially see a shift of some of the smaller producers moving to a larger sort of more streamlined, efficient process and sourcing wine from medium to larger wineries.
The code doesn't really affect them so much as the purchaser. I'm just curious because, and I appreciate you being here, it's very useful to have your evidence, but you did use that phrase, unintended consequences. So somewhere in the back of your mind or somewhere in your organisation, you're thinking about unintended consequences for you and your organisation, but we're not sure what they are.
I'm not prepared to comment on this.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Senator Wilson.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So I think you said, Bridget, you had 84 clients, growers. How many of them would be in this area, the Riverland, where we are now?
My 84 growers,
Yeah.
all reside, majority, all
here,
reside here, yes.
So you also mentioned that you'd be looking for as many contracts as you could get. So, for example, if some of the growers, the CCW growers, were to leave, you would be able to soak up that capacity?
Potentially, yes, if they were the varieties of which we were looking for, correct.
Okay. And is your business vertically integrated at all? Do you own any vineyards?
No, we do not.
Okay, and is there a reason for that?
Additional vineyards requires additional staff, additional management, and it's never been the strategy of the wine group to own vineyards here in Australia. We have, since its inception, we have held very good relationships and partnerships with our grape growers, and that has continued to serve us in good stead so far.
Okay. Can I ask in terms of the pricing for this year, you mentioned your timetable slightly different than the second Wednesday of December that we've heard from other witnesses. Can you just give us a really, not in detail, but just a brief overview of how you set your price? Do you use the spot price, for example, in the months leading up to your timing of your price release? Do you look at what other, you presumably don't know what other wineries are doing, or maybe you do. How do you actually come up with your pricing? Is there a formula for this, and does it change?
Yes, of course, the price is dictated. The price for fruit is dictated from what we see and what we can essentially sell the product for. You work backwards. We're working on a global scale, a global market, and we sell as mentioned in my opening, our direct competitors are the Europeans, and we have to be cost effective and competitive with them. So it is nothing more than simply working backwards, as would anyone in business when you're looking at what you can sell the price for and then cost of goods and then the supply cost as well.
So how useful is the spot price then as a metric or an indicator for you? Because presumably you could go on to the wholesale market and buy wine for X cents a litre on the spot price and then sell it to your market. So rather than taking the raw product from the vineyards, you've got potential to buy on the stock market. The spot price, why don't you do that? Is theoretically speaking here, why wouldn't you operate that way?
We have a business to run, and we have a plant that needs a throughput to reach certain capacity and efficiencies as well. And
because you've already outlaid those funds, right?
Correct.
Okay. But theoretically, if you hadn't outlaid that capital, you could just run a model where you could buy it for spot price. Is there quantity available?
There's millions of litres available. That was the reason we sit. I'd say the reason we sit here today is that the current market is in huge imbalance. There's an absolute oversupply of wine, and I believe it's a common practice for other wineries and certainly of ours. If there's a particular variety that we need, we will go to the spot market, but it will never be at the detriment of the growers or the throughput of the winery, which, as I mentioned, employs 80 odd people.
Yeah. But Senator, I still didn't quite understand your answer to Senator Pocock's question about if you've got good relationships, it sounds like you do, with your growers, and you're running a tight ship and treating everyone fairly, and you haven't had a need for being even in the voluntary code of conduct because you've got things that are going swimmingly for you. I still don't understand why a mandated code would affect you if you weren't having current issues. Do you think it would change the risk imbalance at all on any particular things in relation to your business model?
It may not particularly affect me as a business, but there are, just due to the diversity of the participants in this industry, at some stage it will affect them, and we do work together.
What do you mean by work together?
Well, for that very reason, we're not a one-hat-fits-all situation. I would not like to, whilst TWG can certainly work within the parameters of a voluntary code, there's others that can't. And I don't want to see that code be the detriment of fellow peers, businesses, stakeholders in the industry.
Others that can't because potentially they're not profitable enough?
Others for a number of economic, cultural reasons, pressures that they would be facing in their that they would be facing peculiar to their business.
That's an interesting answer. I might ponder that. just
pondering.
Very quickly, a couple of other things that were raised. Are you aware of this practice of growers having to hold out till their fruit basically raisins or shrivels and then is purchased at a lower tonnage and water is then added in the winery? Is that something you do or you're aware of as an industry practice?
It's certainly not something that the wine group would do as an industry practice, but what I can say is that vintage runs from the end of January, when fruit becomes ripe, and it finishes usually before Easter or come early April. It gives us a very small window to get a lot of fruit through across the bridge and into the winery. It becomes a logistical nightmare when you are dealing with multi people, multi different parties, from growers to trucking companies to harvesters to everything else, to get everything in on time. And at times, sometimes it just doesn't work. There's breakdowns, there's fatigue. Our winery runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week throughout vintage. The only time that I have heard of fruit being left out is not of an intentional nature, is purely off the back of logistics.
No, that's entirely reasonable from my understanding. That's probably it for
Can
now.
I ask, we've got time for a couple of quick ones.
Let's wrap it up and then we can try and get back on track.
Thanks,
Senator
Chair.
Pocock.
Just a couple of other things. What's the average hectare size of your 84 producers?
It varies. We have some soldier settlement blocks as little as 4 hectares, and we have some growers that are 200, 300, 400 hectares.
Right. And what's the average length of contract that you have?
We work between 2 and 3 years.
2 and 3 years. Great. Thanks. Thanks
Just,
for that.
so just quickly, Chair, average size, well, I mean, what about yield? What's the typical yield? You know, we heard today from the previous witness that some of them weren't able to provide more than 11-point-something tonnes a hectare. I've heard other people cropping up to 35 tonnes a hectare here. Do you have any specifications around yield within vineyards?
So if we can bring it back to acres, we work in acres. And I know you can times it by 2.47 when I get that, but for acres we sit between anything between 9 and 12 for our reds, and some of the whites can be a little bit higher than that.
So it would be up over 20. I'm just trying to do the maths myself.
2.5.
Okay, 2.5. Yeah, right, interesting.
Close to 30.
Okay.
Okay. So, thank you, Ms. Nolan. Thank you very much. We'll